Hello, Bunny. How are you today? Hey, Toby. Let's move this over a bit. Okay. All right. So, yeah, I hear there's a storm up in Northern California, Central. It's just gray and kind of somewhat rainy here. So, the guitar, you go back to the Renaissance, and the guitar was a four-course instrument. Basically, like if you put a capo. Yeah, I do use capos. You put a capo on the 5th fret. You don't have to do this. This is just for demo. Put a capo on the 5th fret, and you just have 4 strings, just like a ukulele. And then the way that it was tuned is the same as the top 4 strings, except up like at the 4th fret. So that would be a C chord, for example. And then in the Baroque era, when the guitar got bigger, they dropped the tuning down to what we have now. And essentially the guitar is a triadic instrument in standard tuning. And by that, what I mean is that the 4th, 3rd, and 2nd strings are a triad, or a G chord. D, G, and B. Of course, the G isn't at the bottom. I mean, we put it there, when we're playing bass notes. But it's a voicing of actually a second inversion G chord with the 5th at the bottom. And the top 3 strings are a first inversion E minor chord, a G, B, and an E. You could also think of it as a G6. And essentially, playing like chord solos is just really learning how to move the shapes up and down the neck, using what is, at its core is this kind of triadic nature of the guitar. And you only really have to, just like here's your E minor. One finger and you have E major. One finger and you have G7. So for example, you have a C chord, and you have a G7, and you have a C. But then you move that up one in one voicing or 2 voicings. And when you're playing chord solos, what you're really doing is just following the melody along with the harmonies that go underneath it. So the most fundamental thing, I'm in standard tuning. I'm not in anything fancy, just standard tuning. So the first thing is just to really recognize that when you play cowboy chords, or at least bar chords. I don't know if Hope's on this, Jen. So, but there she is. Yeah, because she needs to learn about this stuff too. Although she can play a mean leaving on a jet plane. That's her forte. But basically, what you've got is you take the top 3 notes of a G chord, because right now we're not. Yeah, Toby, it is the same for a ukulele. It's just everything's so much closer together that you can't really, you don't have quite the flexibility that you do with the longer scale. So the top three strings to begin with, and just, there's a G, there's an A minor, there's a B minor, there's a C, there's a D. Now I'm at the 12th fret. There's an E minor. So when you're following the melody, the melody, the top note, isn't necessarily always a chord tone. Let's see. See here, I'm playing a C6. And then I'm going to what is really a C6-9. But again, it's just the top three notes. There's a cowboy way of doing it. And then here, let's say, I've got a C major 7. And I'm putting the bass note in just to help us out. And then a D minor 7, but the melody notes here, see? A to a G, B to an A, C to a B, and I'm at an F major 7, and let's see. Yeah, E minor 7 flat 5. So I don't know why I'm playing cheek to cheek, but I am. Hang on. So let's look at this from the perspective of the cycle of fifths, which makes life, gives us a very clear structure. So let's say you've got C, A, D minor, G. So, and here, instead of going to a straight A chord, I'm making it an A7, and then I'm adding the augmented fifth, the F. And then D minor, could use an open string for the bass note. And then there's a G13th. If you imagine playing like one of those kind of cowboy G7s, but then you've got the A on the third string, and then the top two strings open. So and how those changes happen. You've got your core chord shapes and chord changes. And there I'm using diminished chords to connect. Let's do it here. G, G sharp diminished, A minor, A sharp diminished. So but all of this is really not playing full chords, which is great if you're playing bluegrass. But when you're playing, in a more jazz context, you don't do full chords. You do like, here's your G7. Freddie Green, who was the guitarist with Count Basie's band, and famously played an arch top that was almost kind of flat. He they have his guitar in the museum in Scottsdale, the Musical Instrument Museum, what's known as the MIM. And underneath the D string is a deep groove in the frets, because a lot of the time he'd just be playing one note instead of a full chord. But more typically, you just grab a pick and I'll show you. You know, sometimes it would be nothing more than 2 notes, just a G7 with just an F and a B. So, you know, so let's say, for example, let's say I'm going to do a 12-bar blues. So there, sliding into the G, but just 3 notes, just the top 3 strings. And then using, like, kind of comping underneath it with 2 notes. So nowhere there do I even have a bass note. Maybe now I do. You know, and the kind of T-Bone Walker, Chuck Berry thing is just playing fourths, you know, just laying a finger over 2 strings. It works great, you know, it's very guitaristic. So there I just kind of launch into, you know, some moving 6. Again, they're just kind of basically stripped down chords. And then, you know, economy is important. Less is more. So kind of breaking it down, I would say, Toby, this is like at least intermediate level, certainly not beginner level. I'm not really good at teaching beginner stuff because I just have too much information and it just starts to pour out. But I do try and keep things on a kind of multi-level approach too. But here's an interesting thing and something to be very aware of. You know, when you play a G7 chord, for example, you know, in the cowboy voice, or the most important part, harmonically, the most important part of the chord is the third, which here is a B, and the seventh, the minor 7th, which is the F. So even though I'm not playing even the bass note, you're hearing it as a, you know, as a definite harmonic statement. Now, the relationship between those 2 notes is an augmented 4th. What's known as a tritone, because it's 3 whole tones. F, G is one, G to A is another, A to B is another. And that tritone is exactly symmetrical, that if you turn it upside down, it's the same interval, which is not true of any other interval in the scale. You know, if you take a third, there's a third, and you invert it. In other words, you turn it upside down. So the G that's on top now goes on the bottom. becomes a sixth. So a third becomes a sixth when you turn it upside down. And the 2 add up to 9. And like a second inverted is a seventh. 2 plus 7 is 9. A fourth inverted is a fifth. So here's a fourth. D to G. If I put that G that's on top on the bottom, I now have a fifth. Well, the augmented fourth is exactly symmetrical. It's an augmented fourth no matter which way around it is. And Jimi Hendrix made good use of that. That opening of Purple Haze, that's an augmented fourth just shifted up and down. But the tricky thing here is that when you're going from a G7 chord and you move to a C7, for example, you don't have to do that, because you can do this. Because the C7 has an E and a B flat in it. And where if you keep the same relationship, the F to the B and the B flat to the E, but all you have to do is move it back a fret. So here's G, here's C, here's G, and then you move up one more, and there's your D. So you've got the whole, like in a 12-bar blues, you've got all the harmonies just in the space there. So. I'm just going to a third. And so using kind of a basic understanding of harmony and then integrating that with what's guitaristic, because there's certain things just lay under the fingers. And there I'm just playing over the top 3 strings. And there was kind of a cool one. That's a voicing of a G9 chord. So F, A, D, F, A, B, G. So the 7th is actually at the bottom. I mean, you put the bass note in. And that voicing, Joe Pass uses that kind of thing a lot. Joe Pass also does a very cool voicing of that's one of my favorites of his. If you're not familiar with Joe Pass, one of the great jazz guitar players. But here, using a voicing like that, yeah, I know when I go up the neck, I don't have a guitar in standard tuning that I have the fret markers on. I should have thought about that, sorry. But I'll stay in the lower position. When you've got these kinds of chord voicings and when melodies sit in different places other than just within the chord, you can, there's room to maneuver. Here's an example of how I would use it. My arrangement of I Can't Give You Anything But Love. The melody, the opening melody, and then one could do, but it doesn't really sound that cool like that. But what I'm doing is I'm playing a C chord like this, so that my pinky is at the fifth fret. And then, so I've got, what would be part of the regular C chord, but instead of playing the C note here, I'm playing it here. And there, the melody, because the underlying chord is a G7, that melody makes an augmented fifth, moving up to the what in this case is really the 13th, but the E. And there, very simple, a D minor 7 sus4, just a D minor 7 with the 4. That's the melody note. So I'm just, keeping the chord in mind. I love that. That's one of my favorite moves on a D7 chord, is that playing a D7 like this. So a C7 just moved up 2 frets. And then sliding to the 4th fret, and then the open string on top. So it's just there, the melody is a B on top of an A7 chord, and I'm adding an F sharp in there, so it becomes an A13th for a moment. Now here, hang on. So the melody, so I'm just doing a D minor, 3 notes, and then moving it up there. I love that one. G7 flat 9. So, do I ever alternate that to 6? I'm not quite sure what you mean by that, Bunny. Can you explain that? The Joe, I'd see the discussion about Joe Pass's books. The Joe Pass stuff is, I have a Joe Pass book that especially when I was in college, that was kind of one of my great kind of study things, because he was so fluid with his chord solos. And Paul was asking about Wes Montgomery. Another one, although whatever Wes did, George Benson, forget George Benson, the pop singer. George Benson, the jazz guitar player in his previous life, could do, I saw him just do the most ridiculously fast and articulate chord soloing. But so much of that style really developed in the late 20s and early 30s. Eddie Lang being really the first great exponent of it. Django didn't do a lot of chord soloing. Mostly what Django was doing was single note stuff. So I'm going to play, just because I can, I'll play, I'm going to play I Can't Give You Anything But Love, and we'll see where it goes. I'll talk about some of it after. anything but love. Jimmy McHugh and Dorothy Fields from 1928, I think it was. So, for example, here, and Bonnie was asking if I do it the same every time, and I have the basic structure, and there are certain parts of the arrangement that are set, but when I get into the soloing, I'll have some touchstones, as it were. I mean, like, for example, there's a C chord, and the melody just sits on top. And then I'm doing that kind of thing, and then, see, like, there's a D minor chord. I might play around the D minor. Now here, this is the thing that you really want to understand when you are doing any kind of chord solo work, is to really get familiar with how the chords, how the voicings change, like where the voicing is. So like here's the D minor 7. See, there's still D minor 7. Now, that's a D minor 9. Of course, I don't have the bass note, but I'll put it there. Now, here's the thing that I'll do that in a lower position so you can kind of see it. Here's a G minor 9. And that's a G minor 7 sus4. Because the top note is a C there. By the way, Jen's talking about seeing George Benson playing at a NAMM show. Many years ago, back in the 80s, when I'd been working with Ibanez on a MIDI guitar. And I was doing a demo for them, and I was kind of at the end of the aisle there, and like at the end of the booth, and I'm sitting there playing Martha My Dear on a MIDI guitar with a piano sound. And there's kind of this shadow falls on me, and I look up, and it's Joe Pass. And it was kind of like, I wasn't sure whether to be like really excited or embarrassed, because, I'm demoing this kind of techno piece of equipment. But it was kind of cool. He seemed to like it. There was the time at the Chicago airport where I had picked up a little parlor guitar at the Washburn factory and sitting at the gate kind of noodling, and I look up and there's Tommy Tedesco standing in front of me with a big grin on his face. So it's kind of fun having those random things. Can I explain my thumb going to the top 4 strings after playing bass notes? Yeah, I mean, basically, I do like whatever gets the notes for me. Now, there are different styles of picking depending on what the note is. So, like for example, here I'm just like, let's say, I'm just doing a strum with the thumb, just downstrokes, and I'm playing. I've got to be careful or I'll start bursting into Mahavishnu Orchestra. But the 5th string is just being muted, so the thumb's just brushing, as opposed to like picking the bass note with the thumb and then picking the 4th and 3rd strings with the fingers. And sometimes I'll use the thumb as an accent. But typically, when I'm playing single notes especially, it's just thumb and one finger, thumb and first, or thumb and 2 fingers. Depends kind of where I am with it. But to have a sense of what's going on stylistically, so that the combination kind of fits the mood. But Like when I was doing Tea Time and playing with Hope earlier, so the bass, the bass player is the thumb, and then the other fingers are really kind of following what's happening with the chords. But then, I might. It just depends on what I need, and it's not. I'm not a technician, but I just kind of use whatever technique I can to get the music, get the guitar to speak musically. It's just however it works. Toby, you were talking about reaching and stretching. Yeah, this is a tip, just as a side note. If you're making a big stretch, and let's say that's a big stretch. I don't know if I could do much more than that. But what you don't want to do, typically, like with Martha My Dear, there's this stretch. And there's no way of doing a stretch like that where you nail the bottom note and then stretch up. You really want to nail the top note and then stretch back. So let's see. See, I'm already there. Yeah, I am in standard tuning. So that's just a tip that, stretch back rather than stretch up. I think, Bunny, that the most important thing is to really find become familiar with what goes where. Just understanding the geography of the neck so that for example, that at the 8th fret, there's your C. There's your, 7th fret, there's your B minor. 5th fret, there's your A minor. I mean, if you're just used to being in the lower positions, you just got to kind of put on your mountain climbing gear and just kind of climb up the fingerboard. And Stan talking about finding the melody notes. I mean, what you have to do, I think a really important thing is that you have to voice the chord so the melody notes are adjacent to where you are. If you've got a melody note up here and you're playing a chord down here, it's just not going to work. So, here's a melody. Melody note might be a G, a D. So, I would, and that's just basically, the C shape, which just moved up here. And let's see. And then the choice of how you go, going around the cycle of fifths there. So, how you do those inner voicings too, the kind of the George Van Epps thing of getting these inner voicings working. All of that stuff it really relies on being familiar with the fingerboard. Yes, Jen. Yeah, I said, go home and learn it. Learn the fingerboard, because that's how you know your way around. And, you develop a kind of a fingerboard GPS fairly quickly if you just really start to pay attention to what you're doing. And the fact that whatever note you're playing on one string, you go to the lower string and go up 5 frets. So that's a B. That's a B. Well, between the third and second, you go up 4 frets. So here's a B, here's a B, here's a B, here's a B. And knowing, if a B and a D is here, then it's also here. And if your melody note is going to be a D here, you just kind of put yourself in that position. octave there. Yeah, I mean, you know, I've been doing it for so long that it's just kind of become second nature. Robert wants to know, how do I judge when I'm, I guess, ready to play a piece live to an audience? Depends on the piece. Depends on the arrangement. I mean, for my tea time sessions on Facebook, I've been doing stuff where I kind of work it out the night before, and just kind of, you know, hang in there. And part of it is just really the, I think, just feeling like I can just do it, you know. And some of the simpler tunes, I mean, I've got arrangements that I wouldn't necessarily think about playing live in front of an audience, you know, a paying audience, until they were absolutely ready. And then I think that it's also, just from a philosophical point of view, that the repertoire that I use in a live show, you know, when it's actually kind of, you know, that kind of gig, is going to be different from what I might do in a more spontaneous kind of setting. You know, I do what I call instant arrangements for Facebook, and those are a nice challenge. You know, it's some artist's birthday. I mean, okay, let's say today's Mozart's birthday, which it is. I mean, so. You know, I don't know how far I would go with that. That's about as far as I'd go, I think. And when it was Beethoven's birthday, I could do, you know, do that and then break into Roll of the Beethoven, you know. So I don't have to commit to too much of the, you know, go too deep in the classical repertoire there. But fingerboard learning tips. Well, I think just, you know, more than anything else, just pay attention to it. I mean, just know what those notes are, so that any time, you know, D, B, G, A, B, D, and, you know, don't drive yourself crazy and try and do the same thing in DAG-GAD until you kind of comfortable finding your way around in standard tuning. But knowing where those notes are, and also knowing where the chord, you know, just having that kind of muscle memory, you know, so if it's an E minor 7 flat 5, for example, or let's see, no, that's not right, hang on, there we go. That just knowing where the chords are, and also understanding harmony. See, but Jen, not just scales, but also arpeggios. So, you know, being able to articulate the chord. I think that all of those things help, because it's really, you know, I mean, music consists of melody, harmony, rhythm, and being able to focus. Especially, I think harmony is really important, because unless you study classical harmony, you don't necessarily get all the kind of the granular detail of voice leading and how resolutions work and stuff like that. Robert was asking about Chet played a nylon. Well, I think Chet played a nylon string, you know, on and off throughout his career, and I certainly, I mean, I do nylon string stuff at tea time occasionally, but I've never been a fan of the sound I got with fingernails. So that kind of puts me at a slight disadvantage with nylon string. But I have a great nylon made by Greg Brandt, who lives in the neighborhood here. That's a fabulous sounding guitar, but in the studios very often nylon string gets called on to be played with a pick rather than fingerstyle because you get that kind of, that movie kind of sound. But what I've done, this is my signature Martin, or at least, the most recent incarnation of it, which is now, just out of the custom shop. And what I've really tried to do is take the steel string to the point where it's playing it has the articulation of a classical guitar. I mean, this is a European spruce top. It's actually a high alpine Swiss top, which is known as moon spruce because it's cut on the waning moon. It gives it it's almost like artificially aging it because the moisture content it is at its lowest when the log is cut. And the approach that I have, that's why I don't put dots on the fingerboard, at least on some of these I don't. The OM18s I've put dots on, but it's just kind of going towards that kind of end of the sonic spectrum, so that it's not just a regular steel string, but it has some of the articulation that would come with the classical, but not that much. I mean, there's certain things, those kinds of patterns just don't speak the same way on a nylon string. Whereas you might play it, but here, which is almost like a country kind of approach. Jen, Louis Sheldon on Valerie, indeed. It's a remarkable guitar part on Valerie. And then Paul talking about augmented chords. Augmenting a chord is actually a very simple thing. I mean, it's simply that when you play a G7, let's just use the top 4 strings. All you're doing with an augmented chord is you're raising the fifth. A raised fifth is called an augmented fifth. You're just raising it by 1 fret. So, you get beginning of Oh Darling. That's an augmented seventh. And the cool thing about augmented chords is that they actually are built out of whole tones. So you can do all kinds of stuff. All kinds of interesting things with augmented. But it's not that intimidating. I mean, it's almost kind of the opposite of a seventh, because on the seventh, let's say you have here's a G7. That F, which is a minor seventh, resolves to the C. Here's the G. I'm sorry, resolves to the E of the C chord. So F to E. The opposite is just going from underneath the E instead of from on top. So, beginning of Stormy Weather. So, yeah, it's not rocket science. It's just understanding. If you understand the basics, and then you add information to it. Robert's asking, how high do top pro guys like yourself rate Tommy Emmanuel? I mean, Tommy is a master guitar player with an enormous repertoire and an incredible showman. In fact, Martin Taylor refers to him as the abominable showman, which I think is fun. And he has just incredible energy. I mean, he's like a dynamo on stage. And it's a fun challenge to get up there, get up on stage, and try and keep up with it. But I've had him here. He's actually been in the studio, and there's some YouTube video floating around of the two of us hanging out and playing some Django stuff. But I've actually recorded him here. Okay, so Bunny, are you saying that you don't really understand the augmented? Is that what you're referring to? Because it's really, it's just, you take the fifth of the scale. So there's your D on the G chord, and you just raise it. Or if I do it even lower, another cool thing in this kind of work is pedal tones. You know, I mean, you get it even in the blues. You know, those kind of progressions. So, you know, cool kind of jazzy stuff. All right, we should probably start to wrap it up, because this was just kind of more than anything else an experiment to see how well it works doing this on YouTube and with the chat. It might be fun to do it as a Zoom thing at some point. So there's no such thing as a sus fifth, Paul. You've got suspended fourths and you've got suspended seconds, because the concept of a suspension there, and of course, you know, your basic D sus, you're suspending the third. Or, so with the fourth, so sus 4 to a regular D, and then a sus 2 is a suspension. In classical harmony, a suspension is anything that hangs over to delay a resolution. So, for example, let's say I'm going from a G to a G7 to a C, but I don't go straight to the C. I keep that F there. You know, you start to hear it as church harmony when you. And then let's say I'm going to the G chord, but that C's there. So that's a sus 4 resolving to the third. There's a sus 4. So, you know, to really kind of, for me to really communicate, you know, what I know, the more you understand about harmony, the more you understand about how chords are put together. And then, you know, we can talk about how they apply to the fingerboard and what you can accomplish on the guitar. That's really, you know, what I call the meta information, is the stuff that informs all the guitaristic activity. So, you know, some of it is shapes, Paul. You know, it's not mathematical as such. I mean, you can bring it down to math or physics, you know, simply by saying, okay, you know, here's a root note, here's the octave, which is a 2-to-1 ratio, 3-to-1 ratio, 4-to-1, 5-to-1, you know, so dividing the string in half or in thirds or in quarters, you know, so you can kind of get into the underlying math, as it were. But you know, it's recognizing the shapes, certainly. You know, when I see, if I'm reading and I see an E minor 7 flat 5, I would most likely do that. But if I was arranging something, I would maybe just play 3 notes where I've got a B flat, a G, and an E. Let's actually put the 7th in there too. So, in fact, one that I've been playing with recently. Let me see if I can find it here. Which would be like a B7 flat 9, sharp 9. Actually, it sounds weird with the B in there, but that's what it is. You know, it's just kind of experimentation. The cool one is actually, you know, C major 7. Just there's a C, and then the top 3 strings with the G, the B, and the E. C sharp minor 7 flat 5 is just changing one note. And then let's see what happens if I go to the D. No. But that, you know, that's, what do I do it actually in the 555. I forget. Yeah, it's funny, I can't just jump in the middle of tunes sometimes. But in any case, we could keep going, but I'm ready for a cup of tea at this point. So, you know, it's, let's work out a way of doing this where we could do some lessons. Now, I do have a relationship with truefire.com, and they have my rhythm guitar class. But it's so much more direct to just go directly through Facebook or YouTube like this. But I'm thinking, you know, maybe a Zoom thing might be cool, because then I can actually see you rather than just hearing, you know, just seeing the chat as it goes by. And there's no lag too. So anyway, thanks for tuning in. Stay safe, stay well, stay hydrated. And I will be back on Facebook on Friday for my Fab Friday. Good to see you all. So thanks, much appreciated. It's 47. That's a pretty good number for something like this. So appreciate it. And do feel free to email me. You can email me at lj@lawrencestuber.com if you have questions or, you know, want to pursue maybe a private Zoom lesson or something like that. I do those on occasion. So, all right. Or Skype too. That works as well. But see you on Friday. Cheers.